So we're just going to make a Pong MVP. That's just the minimum viable product. Um, so Pong is a game that's pretty basic. It's over 50 years old. So it's just basically you got like a black screen, black background, and um, you have two players, and they each have a paddle that they can control, and they can only move up and down. So very simple here. And then in between them is a ball. And the goal is to send the ball off of the side of the screen behind your opponent. So this ball will be bouncing back and forth. And then if it goes off of the screen, like over, like let's say it goes over here, right? It goes off the screen. Um, then that means player two, this player on the right hand side, has scored. So we'll have two paddles, one for each player, and ball in the middle. And then we'll have a scoreboard. Basically, we'll just have um, a number that's going to show, how many times you sent the ball off the other side. Um, make this really big, something like that. And then we need two of these, so we'll put one over here. And that's basically it. That's all we need. So taking this design into GameMaker, what I did is I just went and opened up a blank project. So if you don't have GameMaker Studio, you can just go download it for free. It's from Yo-Yo Games. Um, so it's pretty easy to find. And then once you have it, just run it, make a new blank project, and then this is what you see. Um, the way this is laid out is there are rooms. So on the right hand side, I'm just going to expand the rooms here. And the room is basically the screen. So if you run this game right now, um, it'll just run in the browser, and it's literally just a black box. So that's all we have. So what we can do, and I just hit the play and the stop buttons up at the top to start and stop it. So what we can do is we can set like whatever size we want it to be. So I'm just gonna do like a standard resolution, like 800 by 600 rectangle. And then there's some buttons next to these magnifying glasses on the top right of the room window. And there's like a center fit, so you can click it and that'll just kind of center the room. So once we have that there, basically we need to go in and create our objects. So we need two paddles, one on either side of the screen. We need to put a ball in the middle that's eventually going to move around, and then a scoreboard. So in this objects folder, I'm just going to right click it and do create object. And we're just going to name this, I guess obj prefix. And we're just going to call this one paddle. And we'll do the same thing for the ball. Ball. And then also we're going to need some sprites for these. So down in the sprites folder, you do right click create sprite. So we can do SPR prefix and just call this ball, and then we'll do create sprite SPR paddle. And then we need to basically just specify what size these are going to be. So we can just start with the ball, and there's this little four arrow resize button. You can click on that. And I'm just going to make this ball just 12 by 12. So 12 pixels by 12 pixels. Apply. And then you can click the edit image button to open up an image editor. And I'm just going to fill these in with white and save it. And now I have some tabs open, so I've got the ball up here opened in its own tab, so I gotta go back to my workspace tab. And then we're gonna do the paddle. So the paddle, I'm not gonna maintain this square aspect ratio, so I'm gonna uncheck that box. I'm just gonna make this 10 pixels by 64 pixels. Edit image, same thing, just fill it in, save it. And then we can go tie that to our object. So to kind of get around here on the right hand side, if you just double click whatever it is you want to go edit, it'll take you to it. So there's a little sprite area here. You can just click on this, expand our sprites, pick ball on, SPR ball for ball, and then for paddle, we'll just do the same thing, pick SPR paddle. I'm going to check solid for both of these. And then I think I'm going to add a property because we're going to have to know which paddle is player one, I guess, or which paddle is player two. So there's this variable definitions button. You can just click that and add a variable. So I'm just going to call it is player one. And this is going to be just like a true or a false. So that's a Boolean. And we're just going to leave it unchecked. So basically whenever this object gets created, it'll have this variable and it'll just be false. So every time a paddle is created, none of them are player one, but when we put them into the room, we can tell it which one is player one. So let's go add it to our room because we're gonna have to add two paddles here. So I think you can just drag and drop. So I'm just gonna drag and drop like one of these here and one of these here. And then the one on the left, I'll click that. And on the left hand side, um, there's variables with a little edit button. You can just do an override, check that box is true. So now this one on the left is player one. And going to just position this a little bit higher. I'm just gonna like 32, 22, 24 on this one. And this one we want it to be the same. Um, you know, similar distance from the wall and stuff. So I'm just gonna do that. That looks okay enough. We need to make the ball, so we'll put the ball down here. Let's see, this is, I don't know, like at position 512, 512 maybe. So this is our room, and that's more or less all we're gonna do to the room. The scoreboard might have to be drawn with code, so um, let's think about the other things we have to do. So we do need to create a scoreboard. So pretty much every game is going to have some sort of global variables or global initialization or whatever. When your game starts, you need to initialize things. So I'm going to make something to initialize stuff. I don't exactly know what's going to go in there yet, but I typically do this whenever I make a game. It's called like initialize globals. That way we can set some stuff like, I don't know, maybe the speed of the ball or something when the game starts. And then we'll create one called scoreboard. And then we'll add these to the room as well. So we'll do globals, we'll add the scoreboard. And then on the left hand side, if you select the room, there's this button instance creation order, and that kind of determines how things are drawn and stuff like that. It just kind of I think it goes kind of like top down. So like the first thing it'll do is like add the paddle, then it'll add another paddle, then it'll add the ball, then it'll add globals, then it'll add scoreboard. But in this case, if scoreboard is added last and say scoreboard draws a letter, that'll show up on top of like the paddle or the ball. So this should probably be like in the background, and the globals shouldn't draw anything. So you can just drag and drop and rearrange it to something that makes sense. Then save this. Um, in order to actually like draw text to the screen, we'll have to create a font. So I'll just create a font here, right click fonts, create font, FNT, scoreboard. Just gonna make this like maybe 32, size 32. So now we need to, I guess, make things work. So the first thing I guess we could do is set up the ball. So on the event window, which you can open with this button here, there's like a little add event button. If you click add event, we could go ahead and start adding our events. So we'll need to make an event for, I'm just going to do these with, depending on what it is, I'm just going to pick and choose which one I want. So I think for create, I'm just going to do visual. And what we'll do here is set the speed and set the direction. So there's all of these things on the right hand side. If you go down to movement, uh, you can drag set speed over here and then set direction. So for speed, we're just gonna go with like, I don't know, 4. And then direction, let's say it's going up and to the right. And the speed is the type direction. It just means that that's the way it's moving. The speed has to have a direction for, where it's going. And you can choose how it moves, but we're just gonna go with direction. And then that's basically it for the create event. So once speed and direction are set up here, then we can go to our next event. So basically, anytime we have a game running in GameMaker Studio and we have objects, we have steps happening all the time. So constantly we have steps at multiple times a second happening, and those are calculating things like how objects on the screen are moving and what's colliding with what and all of that stuff. So for our ball, in order to make it figure out when it's going to maybe go out of the screen, or maybe when a player scores and it needs to reset, we need to add all of those checks inside of one of these step functions. And so I typically like to just add the begin step with code here, and then just kind of code out whatever I need. And this all happens kind of like before, kind of like at the beginning of the step process. So like, before it calculates all the movements and redraws everything and all that stuff. So um, basically what we need to do here is figure out if you're going off the top or bottom of the screen. So if you're going off the top or bottom of the screen, we need to reverse your direction, but we only need to reverse how you're moving. So like if you're going up and to the left and you hit the top of the screen, um, going up and to the left, you hit the top screen, you're going to bounce down. You're going to be going to the left still, but you're just going to be going down now. So what we're going to do is we're going to reverse the y direction. So it's, we got a two-dimensional grid. X is horizontal, and then y is going to be up and down. So basically, we just need to know, hey, if you're going off the top or bottom, reverse. So we do that just by checking the position of the object we're on. And so you have access to variables here inside of these objects. So we can just look at the X and Y position just by simply doing X and Y. So we'll say if Y is less than or equal to 0, basically, that means you're going off the top of the screen. But it doesn't really matter where you're going. Your direction to change it vertically, if you just add 90, it doesn't really matter what it is currently. It just reverses the y direction, and that's because it's based on like a 360 degree, and when you go over 360 it just rolls over. So if you have direction 340 and you add 90 to it, then you get 430. It just subtracts 360. So then you're back to 70. So whatever a 70-degree angle would be, and that's going to be the inverse direction in the y in the vertical direction. So also we'll check if we're going out of the bottom of the screen, but we also need to accommodate the ball is 12 pixels. So we did 800 by 600. So we'll just do, the 600 minus 12 to get 588. So if we go over that 588, that means the bottom of the ball is actually starting to go off of the screen, starting to draw off the screen because the ball is tracked by the top left pixel. So the X and Y is the top left pixel of the ball. So this is the same thing that we just invert the vertical direction. And then the next thing we need to do is figure out if you're going off in the other direction, which is horizontal, and that's where players are going to be scoring, right? So if we go off the left side of the screen, that means player 2 has scored. So we'll just say player 2 scored. And then if you go off the right side of the screen, well, that means player 1 has scored. And this is just, again, accommodating for the 12 pixels, so 800 minus 12. Yeah, so how do we do this? So basically, we need to track the score somewhere, right? So we need to have like a score for player 1 and a score for player 2. So that's usually where I just go ahead and add a game start event to my globals. And then it's just a matter of just creating the global. So to do this with GameMaker, you just do a global dot and then whatever you want to call it. So we're going to do player 1 score. So that equals 0. And player 2 score, right? So that's that. Now, if we go back to our ball, when somebody scores, we can increment those. So I do like to copy and paste here, so I don't misspell anything. So we'll just do plus plus, and we'll change this to 2. So player 2 scored, or player 1 scored, and their score goes up by 1. And then what we need to do is say, okay, well, they scored, so let's kind of reset the ball somewhere near the person who scored's paddle. So to put this like to the right side of the screen, we'll do like, I don't know, 700 and 300 maybe. And then on the left side of the screen, we'll just do like 70 and 300. So basically this resets the position. So now the ball's back on the screen. And then we also need to reset the speed. So I'm a big fan of just not making like magic numbers here. So I'm just gonna make a global for my speed in case I don't like the speed. So we'll say that ball speed always starts at 4, right? And then up here, we'll just say, okay, the speed of this is just equal to whatever we have that to. Speed equals. So that's that. Um, I think that's pretty much it for this step. Okay. Now we need to add, what happens when the ball hits one of the paddles. So if it hits a paddle, it should bounce off. More or less should bounce off. Now it can hit a paddle um, kind of on well, I guess 3 surfaces really. So you could hit this surface here, right? So the left side. But you could also be coming up from the bottom and hit the bottom, or maybe you can be coming down. But there's no way we're hitting this other side here. That's not happening. Um, because the ball's not going to be moving that direction. So we just got to figure out, okay, so when this collides with a paddle, I've selected collision, object paddle. So when this collides with a paddle, what do we do? So the first thing we have to do is figure out, I don't know, which paddle are we hitting, because this event's going to fire for every paddle. So when the ball hits paddle, this goes. So we'll say, okay, well, if the paddle is player one, but how do we reference paddle? Um, GameMaker Studio has it built in. They just call it other. So when you're doing an event like collision, you'll have something called other. So we can just do other, and then we say is player one. And if it's not player one, then we'll figure that out down there. Um, so basically, we're either going to invert the speed in the y direction or the x direction, depending on where it hits. So if it hits like the bottom of a paddle or something, then we got to invert the y speed, or if it hits the top, we got to invert the y speed. If it hits the left side, we got to invert, um, the speed is moving the x speed. But basically, they call this like v speed and h speed. So vertical speed and horizontal speed are two variables that you can access here. So you can do like v speed or h speed, and these represent just the y movement or just the x movement, respectively. So basically, what we need to do is say, okay, well, if it hits the top or bottom, let's check that first. So if x is less than or equal to, they're not x plus 1, um, basically meaning, are we colliding, but we've gone further. Uh, Sorry, not further, because it's actually less than, because this is player one. But if we've gone further to the left than where that paddle is, then that means we're hitting with the top or the bottom. Otherwise, we've got to be hitting with the other side. So that's basically all this is checking. Is like, hey, when a collision's happening, which side of this line are we on? You know, which side of this line are we on when this collision happens? Because if we're on the other side of it, that means the ball came from the top or bottom. Otherwise, the collision would have already happened, and it still wouldn't be happening anymore because you would have bounced off. So here we just invert the speed in the y direction. Otherwise, we send it back to the other player, which inverts it in the x direction, so horizontal speed. And then more or less, we're going to do the same thing here for player two, except we're going to do if it's greater than and equals, and we're just going to, for a little bit of padding, invert that to a minus. Yes, I think this looks good. And then the next thing we want to do is, to make things interesting, we'll just speed up the ball a little bit every time it hits a paddle, so that then that way eventually somebody will lose when it starts to go too fast. So that's what this does. Say, okay, figure out when we're colliding, how far we've gone, to figure out if we're hitting the top or the bottom, or the left or the right, and then invert the speed respectively. And then I guess the next thing we need to do is paddle. So the ball's done then. So the next thing is paddle, and here we need to do the controls. So the way we're going to set this up is player on the left is going to be player one. We can control them with WSAD, and then the player on the right we can control with the arrow keys up, down, left, right. But since they can only move up and down, we're only going to have to do those 4 keys. So let's add that. So go to the paddle, event, add event, key down, and so we can add up, down, letters, and then we'll do W. And then S. And then based on this, we need to figure out um, how to move the paddle. So if up is happening, then we need to move player 2 up. So what we can do is say if is player 1, otherwise it's going to be player 2. So basically we just need to make sure you're not off of the screen. As long as you're not off the screen, we'll just move up. Um, let's use that initial speed here. Where is it? Ball speed. Let's make a paddle speed. And then we'll go set that on the paddle here. Okay, so if you're player 1, do some, otherwise move up. Okay, so then we'll do the same thing for down, except we need to make sure they're not off the bottom of the screen, which is 600 minus 64. And then you just do plus equals. And then for S, it's going to be the same thing, but we're doing it for player 1. And for W, same thing, but we're doing it for player 1. So now I've got up player 1, down player 1. Sorry, up player 2, down player 2, up player 1, down player 1. And finally, we need to make a scoreboard. So down our scoreboard function, let's add a draw event and then initialize um, a couple of things so that we can start writing font. So we can tell it kind of like how we want things to be aligned, vertical and horizontal, which font we're going to use, which is the one that we added earlier called F&T Scoreboard. Opacity. So it doesn't completely block out anything when there's stuff being drawn above or below it, potentially. We need to set a color. So it's going to do white. Then we're going to draw our text. So I'm just going to pick arbitrary position on the top left and top right. So I'm just going to say for player 1 we'll do like 150 as the X and Y. And then we'll draw player 1 score. And then same thing for player 2, but we'll just say like maybe 640 and 50. So that's going to be way on the other side of the screen. Okay, and I think that looks pretty good. So we could probably run this now and kind of see what happens, see if it works. So we can just save everything and click the play button. All right, and we have Pong. So let's see how it works. I'm not very good at it. Let's make sure player one can score. Huh, what's happening here is player one, make sure player two can score. Oh, okay, player two can score. All right, and then let's make sure the ball goes faster. So every time this hits, it should go up a little bit. 3, 4. Okay, it's moving now. All right, and that's it. Now you have Pong, and so basically we can take this and expand on it. So I think in the next video we'll add the menus so it'll look like a game. All right, thanks for watching.